question I get quite a lot from my clients is whether or not you should eat something before you exercise. Because a lot of people have heard this, that if you exercise while you fasted, you tend to lose more fat or you burn more fat, because theoretically there's no food in your body, so your body therefore needs to use its stores to then fuel that that exercise or that activity that you're doing. And of course, theoretically that makes a little bit of sense, but I thought today I'd talk a little bit more about that and just really try and give you some clarification whether or not you should be eating something before you exercise. And we'll touch also on what is the best time to exercise and so forth. So before we start, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Melissa Null. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm part of the Body 20 Nutrition Doctor team. If you're new here, very welcome. And if you enjoy these videos, I urge you to follow on and along. We tend to upload them every second week, and if you have any specific questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, please send them through on email or on WhatsApp, and we will gladly put that into the videos. Or if you have any questions, of course, we'll then get back to you. So back to what we wanted to talk about today is whether or not you should eat before you exercise. So the answer is basically it depends. Depends on person to person. Some people really need to eat something before they exercise because they need that energy, even if it's just for the mental clarity or the mental strength, or just feeling like you have more energy, leading to them having a better exercise response or feeling more powerful when they exercise. Then yes, that might be beneficial for someone to eat before they train. Other people tend to not want to eat before they exercise, maybe because they exercise really early in the morning and they don't want to eat anything beforehand. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to personal preference. So there's no research showing that the fat loss or fat burning of the body is increased if you exercise in a fasted state. You really need to decide for yourself whether you actually can exercise in a fasted state, and whether it is beneficial for you as a person, or whether you can actually feel better when you eat something small before you exercise. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to when we're looking at fat loss specifically, it comes down to the overall energy balance. So think of it as, for example, you going to draw money from the ATM. And if you draw money in the beginning of the month, or if you draw money at the end of the month, it really doesn't matter. You are going to draw the money and your account balance is going to change. So it really doesn't really matter necessarily on the timing. It really comes down to your personal preference and to the overall calorie deficit. It doesn't matter that you don't eat anything before you exercise and then you overeat for the rest of the day, and then you're kind of still in that calorie balance or in a calorie surplus, then you won't see that fat loss that you maybe wanted to achieve. So like I've mentioned, it comes down to personal preference and how you find your exercise ability and performance is in whichever state you exercise, whether you've eaten something or whether you haven't eaten anything. So let's say, for example, you do want to eat something before you exercise because you've noticed that you do tend to feel a little bit better, but what do you eat? That's always the question. And again, this is comes down to personal preference. Some people can eat anything and they're fine. Others their tummies are very sensitive to what they eat. But in general, when we're looking at exercise, especially if it's a cardio type of exercise, we're going to run or you're going to cycle, or you're going to increase your heart rate quite significantly, then something that is higher in carbohydrates that are easily to metabolize, so we refer to them as high GI carbohydrates, would be a better option. Something like a nice ripe banana. It doesn't need to be overripe, but not a green banana, like a nice ripe banana, or a tropical fruit, for example, or it could be rice cakes with maybe like a small amount of fat or protein spread onto it. Something small like that. People enjoy having maybe like a cereal or porridge before the exercise, whether it be Pro Nutro or Future Life or something in that sense. It can also be oats, and others enjoy eggs with toast, for example. So you need to experiment what works for you, but in general, something that is higher in carbohydrates to give you that glucose to fuel the exercise. and then something that is typically lower in fiber. It's the only time we prefer lower fiber foods is before exercise, because then we don't delay the gastric emptying as much. In other words, we don't let the food stick around in the stomach for too long, because unfortunately, if you are going to exercise, your heart rate's going to increase, and that's going to lead to the blood flow to move away from your stomach to your muscles, like your legs and your arms and your brain and so forth, to be able to do the exercise. But with that blood moving away from your stomach, it tends to lead to that uncomfortable feeling of stomach cramps or even a runny tummy if you've eaten something that is going to stick around in your gut for too long. So we don't want things that's going to just linger around there. So those are typically higher fiber foods and even high fat foods. So healthy fats like avo and nuts and seeds and spreads are great, but be mindful of the portion. You don't want to go overboard with it, because like I said, it might delay the gastric emptying, which can cause unhappy tummy when you are exercising, especially cardiovascular training. I mean, with weight training, it might not have such a massive effect if your heart rate isn't going to go really high. But yeah, we definitely want to focus on carbohydrates and then some form of fat or protein just to accommodate that if you want, just so that you have that fuel ready for your training. It also doesn't need to be a massive amount. It can be something small. If you're going on a longer, more like long endurance types of training, or you're going to spend more than an hour training, running or cycling or whatever it might be, then fueling beforehand might definitely be beneficial, but then also during the exercise, because you won't be able to eat enough beforehand to fuel the whole exercise if it's going to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. So then taking something during the exercise is also definitely beneficial. Again, think of things that are lower in fiber, higher GI, carbohydrate based things that's lower in fat, to really make sure that it doesn't take too long to get out of your gut. And then of course, post-recovery or recovery post-exercise nutrition is very important. We've spoken about this before. That's where we really want to make sure that we are, recovering from that training session, especially if you don't have a lot of time to recover before the next session. Let's say you're training for something specific and you need to train twice a day, or you trained this afternoon and you need to exercise tomorrow morning again. Then we want to make sure that we're speeding up the recovery by having a good quality protein present, whether it be plant-based or animal-based, doesn't matter, it's your choice. But then if you see that and that can be a meal, it can be a normal meal, doesn't need to be a protein shake, for example. But if you tend to see that you don't get in your protein sufficiently because you're not a big eater, or you don't have time, or you're very busy, then a protein recovery shake that you buy from a health food store or nutritional supplement store might be beneficial. So, and that's the thing with nutrition, I've noticed that is quite confusing and frustrating a lot of the times, but we shouldn't see it in that way. We should see it as a blessing in disguise, really, is that nutrition comes down to personal preference and really to how you respond to something. So the way I respond to something and the way someone else responds to something isn't necessarily going to be the same. So it's really trial and error. You need to see what you enjoy, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and really give yourself time to adapt to that and work according to that. Lastly, I just want to touch on whether it's better to exercise in the morning or in the evenings. Again, it is based on really also genetics, but personal preference and your time available. So if you are a morning person and you have the time available, the morning training might be something that you want to do, or it might be in the evening if you want to rather do that. It really comes down to your personal preference, but we do see that genetics does play a role. So some people are inclined to have a better performance in the morning, and others may be better at night or in the evening. You can do your genetic testing for that, but I don't think it's necessary. You might even have noticed it by just playing around and trying, morning sessions versus evening sessions and seeing what works better for you. So that's it from me today. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, let us know, and I'll see you in the next one.